Welcome to this Cambridge Marketing College webinar. This is a topic called responsible marketing, and it is really one of the fundamental building blocks for building trust in 2025. It's something probably, if actually you stop and think about it, we should have been doing for a whole lot of time. This is something that is probably nothing actually particularly new, but the focus on responsible marketing is really in the public limelight right now. A lot of organizations, a lot of brands, a lot of sectors, and a lot of countries are now focusing towards the concept of responsibility and taking real ownership and accountability for everything that they do, that they say, and the ways in which they behave. So for marketers, this is a fundamental way that we can start to build trust with our stakeholders, with our customers, our staff, our employees, and everybody in and around our organization. Somebody once used the phrase wholesome marketing with me, and it's really resonated and stuck with me. And I think that to me is the definition of responsible marketing. It's just a wholesome way of doing business, a wholesome way of being. So responsibility in marketing is for us taking the reins and really understanding that this comes in a whole range of different guises and shapes and sizes, but it's about doing the right thing. So as we begin to explore responsible marketing in 2025, there are two kind of concepts really that come to play here, and we're going to explore these in this conversation. One is transparency, and the other is authenticity. And these are real pillars, if you like, for building brand loyalty. Because as you go forward as a responsible marketer or as a responsible brand or organization, you begin to see loyalty being fostered with the audiences that you communicate with. So there's a kind of a win-win going on here. The more that you're transparent, the more that you're authentic, the more that you're doing the right thing in your marketing, the more that you instill trust in your audiences. And that in itself generates a new level of loyalty. So there is a lot to like about focusing on responsible marketing. So we're going to understand here why responsible marketing matters right here, right now. We're going to look at some of the key theories that underpin this idea of responsible marketing, and we're going to focus on some practical, actionable steps to begin to become more transparent as far as we can and become more authentic. Hopefully we already are to a certain extent. And we'll look at a couple of little kind of examples in different sectors where it becomes really obvious that this isn't just a nice thing to do. This is an absolutely essential thing to do in the way that we're going to be trading as we go forward in our organizations into the future. So there's a commercial gain here. There's a customer lifetime value gain here. And it's just the right way of doing marketing. So why is this responsible marketing thing mattering now more than it ever has? Well, there's a lot of research coming through on this topic right now, and Edelman Trust Barometer came up with a very, very interesting, very recent example that says basically consumers are now absolutely demanding ethical practice with the brands that they prefer, the brands that they will do business with, the brands that they will buy from, and that 83% of these consumers prefer brands that they trust. Now, that is just going off the charts in terms of a message, really, that says if your target audience doesn't fully trust you and the claims that you're making, the direction that you're going, the strategic intent that you have as an organization, they're going to go somewhere else because they have the option to do that. And we're seeing regulations tighten as well around this. We're seeing the impact of GDPR, GPSR, which focuses really on doing best practice in terms of product, not just making claims, not just holding data appropriately, but this is coming across in all forms of doing business. So the regulations are tightening in and around all of the restrictions and the opportunities that we have as marketers. We're seeing organizations now starting to be fined because they are greenwashing. They're not being able to substantiate the claims that they're making. We're seeing advertising standards being really tightened up. And all of these things, you could argue, oh, wow, this is becoming really tough to be a marketer. But actually, if you take the other perspective, these are all the things that should have happened a long time back. And now they are. Now we're being really regulated in a proper, responsible way. So it is time for all of us using that marketing badge to really, truly step up. And those organizations that do are going to see competitive advantage. Authentic brands achieve at least 25% higher customer retention. Again, irrespective of where you look on the research, the number might be slightly higher, slightly lower, but we're seeing significant improvement now in customer retention for brands that responsibly market. So there's a lot to be said here commercially and strategically for doing responsible marketing. Now, we see actually on this particular slide, and I've already used this word consumer. And for those of you who've listened to some of the things that I've been talking about recently, you'll understand the fact that I can't really sit particularly comfortably with the word consumer now that we are looking at responsible marketing. Because if we are in our marketing encouraging more consumption, for me, if you take the sustainability angle here, that is not us being responsible marketers. So I think even the terminology, even the stories that we tell ourselves or the words that we use, like consumer, we need to revisit. So there's a lot of work to be done. If we have to reinvent and turn marketing around to become more responsible, more accountable, more authentic and more true, then there's a lot of kind of, deep inward thinking, both strategically but also tactically, that needs to go on. Having said that, if we're willing to take this on and really willing to give this thing a go, we need to start from our strategic foundations. And there's a lot of theory that goes around strategy. I'm sure if you've done any form of marketing planning, you'll know that, there's a lot of theories behind this. But at a very, very basic level, and certainly with a responsible lens, if you could call it that, we need to start looking at the beginning at our stakeholders. Freeman's stakeholder theory, which talks about balancing the needs of all stakeholders and not just shareholders, gives us a lovely reminder that no matter how on a day-to-day basis our organizations, particularly for a commercial business, pushes us as marketers to be commercially savvy, to be selling more, to be supporting the growth of the business. Actually, if we're balancing the needs of all stakeholders rather than just driving profit and just looking at those financial numbers, then actually there's a whole lot more going on here that we're going to need to take accountability for. So there's a responsibility that comes into play here. I'm sure you're aware of the phrase corporate social responsibility, CSR. It's been around for a long, long time now. And that's all about aligning business operations with societal values. In other words, those stakeholders that we were talking about and the planet itself, what is in those entities, if you like, best interest? So aligning our operations, what and how and why we're doing business with the values and the needs of the world around us. This is true CSR. We can't play lip service to it. We've got to think about this deeply and do this properly. We need to spend time as an organization, not just marketers, but as a broader organization, exploring how we do business, why we do business, and aligning that with the needs of the world around us, including stakeholders and including the planet and the communities in which we reside. And for often we find actually, if we go into doing this and the deeper we get into this, we find what is described as an authenticity gap. This is the gap between the brand messaging and the actual customer experience. It is the gap between our business operations and actually what the world around us needs and desires from us. This authenticity gap is a really interesting one to explore. I've always been, as I've grown up in marketing, really fascinated by this idea of gap analysis. For lots of us in some of the work that we do as marketers, we find that there are gaps between the need and the actual performance, between the desire and actually what we're delivering. And this kind of gap approach is really interesting when it comes to responsible marketing, because it is our responsibility to close that gap between what we're claiming and actually what we're delivering, between where we are now and where we want to get to. And so what we're looking to do here really is an actionable insight for any marketer, no matter whether you're strategic at the C-suite level or if you're a junior marketer just kind of starting out. It is about looking in the mirror and aligning all of the things that we do strategically and tactically on a day-to-day basis with a broader business ethic. In other words, knowing that it's the right thing to do means we have to do the right thing. There's no kind of, almost excuse that is worthy of any kind of merit at all now that says, okay, well, we can kind of get away with it, or, well, we'll put it off till tomorrow. There is no opportunity to do that now. Responsible marketing is about saying it is right here, right now. It is about doing it today. We've opened this Pandora's box of opportunity. We're looking to make great strides in this direction. So it's now. And this is kind of going to lead into really an example, I guess, if we're looking at examples of how to do this stuff, is evolving responsible marketing approaches. I mean, the first one is very much transparency in, as an example, AI-driven marketing. If you look last year, the way that AI certainly came into, well, and onto our radars, if not right into how we're actually doing business now, and certainly how we're creating content, how we're automating bits and pieces of what we do. There was very much limited disclosure, if you like, about how AI generated content, for example, in campaigns and in our decision-making processes, was actually playing out in the public sense. We didn't really have to say much about it. We could just do it behind the scenes. But what we're finding now in here in 2025 is that this has evolved into also almost a mandatory content labeling and much greater transparency of where and how we're using AI. So this is a simple little example here about how if we're going to use some of these emerging technologies, to be a responsible marketer, we need to be more transparent about how we do it. The EU AI Act, for example, is being updated to force organizations operating within the EU to be more transparent now. This is becoming mandatory. So if you kind of think of it in this way, if we can get ahead of the game, even if in our sectors we're not being told we have to behave this way, if we get ahead of the game and actually are responsible, transparent marketers, there's competitive edge here because our competition are probably not doing it until they're forced to. So the impact on us is that, we do need to inform our customers when AI is being used in this example. And this is going to foster trust and it's going to demystify things like automation. Customers are going to understand that actually there isn't a human communicating with us at this stage in the journey, but that's kind of okay because the brand has told us that that is the case. So we're going to see a reinvention, if you like, of this whole customer experience and customer journey. So what do we have to do? We have to be more honest and true. There is no kind of shadow to hide in here if we're going to be a responsible marketer. It's a really interesting new positioning that we're having to take. And if, as an example too, we focus on our supply chain and sustainability in our supply chain. Last year, there were general commitments, if you like, to sustainability with, as we will have heard across a number of brands, broad kind of aspirational goals like, oh, we're going to go for net zero by 2050 or maybe 2030. And that's kind of this generic kind of phrase that says, yeah, we're good guys, we're on the road to somewhere and we're going to be in a good place in the future. This year, now, as a responsible marketer, we need to be much tighter in those claims. So this year, we're looking to be much more specific. We're looking to have time-bound action plans that are shared openly. So something like, we're going to be reducing our carbon emissions by 30% in 2025 is going to be much more appropriate than just these broad aspirational goals. Again, this is responsible marketing, hugely precise. And then maybe even things like live dashboards showcasing our progress. Well, that's honest, that's open, that's authentic. And can you imagine if you could do this, as long as it wasn't obviously sharing commercially sensitive stuff that kind of almost puts you in a commercially vulnerable position. If you're able to actually share this kind of level, bringing your customer into the mix so they feel part of your journey, Well, wow. Can you imagine yourself actually working with a brand or buying from a brand that was able to do that? Well, you'd certainly trust them, wouldn't you? I would. So if you can start to think in this way, there's big opportunities here. The impact here is that our customers are demanding granular proof of sustainable practice. So moving away from these generic, arguably greenwashing kind of claims where it's like, yeah, we're good guys, we're on the journey, to no, here's the evidence, here's the proof that we're actually doing something about this. This is responsible marketing right here, right now. And it is about being tighter. It is about making more effort. This is not easy stuff, but it's vitally important to be able to make these kinds of claims. A third example, evolving responsible marketing approaches, is when it comes to personalization versus privacy. Last year there was a heavy reliance on third-party data for personalization, and often this would raise privacy concerns. But we're now seeing a shift this year to zero-party data strategies where, our customers are voluntarily sharing preferences in exchange for greater transparency about how their data is actually being used. And so what we're looking to do here is part of, alignment with GDPR updates, and these are coming through thick and fast now. This whole privacy first initiative that you'll be reading about in the media, if you stay close to this, gives our customers a lot more control over their data. It puts them into the CRM systems that we're operating. It's not hiding that data away and saying, hey, this is our data about you, but we're not really going to share with you how we're using it or what we're holding. But it actually sets up a relationship that is open and honest and true, that says, yeah, we've got this data about you because you've bought from us in the past and we've been watching your behavior on social media. We understand when you click through from those emails at this particular time of day to these particular products. We know what you're doing. We're watching you. It's a bit big brother, but we're doing it anyway. But the reason we're doing it is so we can personalize a service to you. And if your customer then says, well, that's kind of okay, as long as I can watch what you're doing, as long as I can actually be part of this conversation, rather than you just doing it behind these smoke and mirrors, I don't really like that because I trust you a bit, but I don't trust you fully. Imagine them being part of this database around them and a part of that experience, because if you're properly listening as a marketer, you can get the feedback, you can get that research, you can get that understanding and that conversation flowing. So when they say, hi, I don't want you storing that piece of data about me, you can then go in and say, well, why is that? And then you can then be doing continuous improvement. So there's a real value on both sides of the equation here. Your customers build that trust in you, but you also then build that opportunity to have those conversations with them. So you learn more about them to be able to provide more value back to them, a win-win on both sides of the equation. So we're starting to see this playing out both at a strategic level, but also at a tactical level for organizations where they're starting to build this sort of thinking into their day-to-day activities. And one of the key tactics here is going to be transparent messaging. I mean, openly sharing this stuff, not just the data you hold around customers, but openly sharing product sourcing, pricing, impacts, that kind of thing is a great way of building trust and real advocacy in your customers' eyes, because they'll see you as the good guys, whilst your competition is kind of still holding everything close to their chest and not really releasing much stuff. As a responsible marketer, if you're openly sharing how you do business right the way through your value chain or your supply chain, openly sharing the journey that you're on to improve efficiencies, to be value-based in your pricing, and show the impacts that your organization is making, both positively, but also, I'm not going to use the word negatively, but in a challenged way, but you're dealing with those challenges and you've got plans and you're going to share those plans. What a great way of transparently building that relationship. Again, to the point of commercial sensitivity. I'm not here talking about a lovely kind of tree hugging wishy-washy kind of sort of non-commercial sense of marketing. I'm talking here about practical stuff that you can openly share, because it's not going to damage your business or the reputation. It's just only going to add value because you're the honest marketers, you're the honest brand. And of course, this is all about customer centricity. That's a big word to go away and think about, but customer centric content, addressing real needs over sales pitches. Because once you get into this mindset, in this responsible way of thinking about your marketing, it becomes addictive. It becomes really immersive. It becomes almost, an insatiable appetite for doing this stuff better and better. And of course, then what you're going to be doing is rather than just pitching to a customer or pitching to a prospect, you're getting deep into a conversation, finding out what their real needs are, and then providing value against those needs. It's going to turn things around from the old features and benefits approach, which is so outdated now, into a new way of doing business. Addressing real needs over sales pitches is a new style of marketing for many organizations in many sectors who are still trading on, well, we've got this brand proposition and we've got this story to share with you. And would you like to buy it? That's not what this is about. Responsible marketing at a tactical level is about understanding the kinds of messages that you put out to entice in a conversation. And that's where you're going to get a really deep sense of what the customers are looking for from you. And then you're going to be able to solve their pain points and their challenges in unison with them. So this is all about partnership marketing. For those of you who understand the concept of account-based marketing, if you're in B2B, this is where it's really coming to the fore, really going deep into the customer's needs and the customer's psyche, and then developing clear ethical policies around your communication. So you're communicating values, you're communicating value in the highest level of sense in your marketing campaigns. So it is all about building the relationship, not just trading with products and services. That feels so last year. Well, it was outdated last year, but it feels so kind of old school marketing where we're just trying to trade on the sale. We're just trying to trade on, hey, my product's better than that product over there from that competitor. This is so much deeper. This is so much more profound and fundamental in terms of adding value to everyone around us. This is responsible marketing. So how are you going to do this then on a step-by-step kind of plan, if you like? There are some steps to take. I mean, we're only really scratching the top of the surface of this topic here, because obviously time doesn't permit us to go too deep in this particular session. But just to give you a sense of where you can begin this stuff, because I guess, talking at a very, very broad level here, and we haven't gone down into any particular sectors yet. We're not really looked at any kind of examples, but what we're doing is we're taking this kind of overview, if you like, for what responsible marketing is and how it helps us to build trust right here, right now. So the first step really is going to be auditing current marketing practices. Take a really good, honest look at how you do what you do. Identify areas that are lacking transparency or authenticity. Not necessarily areas that are commercially performing well or not so well, but actually look at this much from a sort of an ethical perspective. Look where you are performing well or not so well, where areas can be maybe tightened up, where you could be a little bit more transparent about what you do. Remember, we're not trading here or marketing here with product or service. This is about relationship and value and process and systems. And this is about authenticity. If you look when you're doing your audit and you think, yeah, we could have done that a little bit more honestly, or that's kind of on brand, but it's not really. Those are those little warning signs. That's where it starts to flash a little bit of amber rather than green. And it says, okay, there's something to pay attention to here. So auditing current marketing practices is a great starting point. Second step would be to define ethical standards, because when I use the word ethical, it has so many different connotations and different meanings for different people and different sectors and different markets. So really defining your ethical standards. Collaborate with your leadership team, your management team, and if you're in a broader kind of marketing team, get those conversations stimulated so that you can start to establish some clear policies about, where do we want to take this? When we talk about ethics, what do we want that to be? How do we want to realize this? Because you need to have those conversations. Otherwise, you're all going to have a slightly different perspective on this topic. So it's important to really align who it is you're working with and get everybody on board so you're talking a consistent story. Incorporate some feedback mechanisms, create channels for customer input, and then demonstrate how you're responding and actioning against those inputs. So I talked a little bit about enabling customers to see and adapt and change the data that you're holding on them. Or maybe it's actually product performance. Maybe you give them a feedback loop so they can really feed in not only reviews, but actually maybe performance ideas, things or features or benefits that they're looking for from your products and services. Now they've actually used them. Give them those feedback loops so that you can get into those kinds of conversations. It's almost like having a personalized one-to-one focus group down to the level of one-to-one interaction. Those kinds of feedback mechanisms can be so valuable for understanding how you can focus and prioritize where to build trust in this kind of a responsible marketing model. And then as you start to do that locally, you can start to build cross-departmental teams, collaborating with those who maybe in your organization are responsible for CSR, maybe the legal team, maybe your customer service team, sales, operation teams, wherever you see these kind of touch points adding value to this responsible business and building of trust, then have those collaborations, set up those meetings, get those conversations going. It does take time. I mean, I'm talking here about stuff that isn't going to be solved today or next week, but starting the journey is the best point. The first steps in those longer journeys have to start with those first steps. So it sounds a little bit cliched, but it is so, so true. And it really is true that you need to make a start. And by doing that, you can then launch some little pilot projects, little pilot campaigns, starting small with measurable objectives. So maybe take a small subset of your customer base and get into conversation with them. Maybe give them those feedback loops. Maybe start to serve them in a slightly different way. Maybe start to bring them in to have proper deep interactions with them and find out what's going on by actively listening. Active listening is a responsible marketing approach. And it will allow you then to measure, to iterate, and to scale. So you can use analytics to refine and expand on your initiatives and those pilot campaigns. You can start to scale up the stuff that works and maybe repurpose and rework on the stuff that doesn't. Not everything will work as you start to roll these little initiatives out for being a more responsible brand and a more responsible business. But the things that do work, that's where it starts to get really exciting. So where might you see this play out and what kinds of things could you do? Well, as a kind of a pseudo case study here for maybe a retail organization. So let's say a scenario here for a retail organization, a mid-sized retailer, for example, integrating maybe some sustainable product lines and communicating maybe a sourcing transparency, if you like, over how they actually source the products that they sell. Now, they're likely to see a big upturn, a big increase in customer loyalty scores, which, of course, then by default is going to give them some positive media coverage. They again are the good guys. They're the people who source source responsibly, and they're already seeing, their customers, feeling like their brands are, really, really positive. And we're going to see that loyalty, those repurchases, and also advocacy in a public sense come through. And you're going to see that publicly in social media and on trust and review sites, for example. So that would be a really nice, simple little example for a retailer. And what would they have done? Well, the steps that they would have taken they would have partnered with ethical suppliers. So they will have been looking along their supply chain to understand, okay, well, who are the suppliers who we'd like to work with? And we're going to do that differently. They might have introduced QR codes, for example, on those products, linking to the product sourcing details in store, enabling a customer to come in and not just see a lovely garment, but actually maybe scan the QR code on that garment to find out where the garment was sourced from. Again, building that loyalty and that interaction, maybe again with a feedback loop to give some customer response and feedback. And the other bit they will have done clearly here is to train the staff in store on the messaging, on the backstory. So really kind of circling around and finishing off that loop of activity. So the people are involved, the customers involved, the supply chain is involved, and the processes within the organization are involved in this form of responsible marketing. So just a simple, neat little way of just saying, okay, I kind of get there's lots of little pieces of the jigsaw here that I'm going to need to uncover to make this thing happen. In the tech industry, let's think of a tech case study, for example, here. So what kind of a scenario could we look at here for a responsible marketing tech company? Well, maybe a tech company addresses data privacy concerns through transparent data practices. We started off with, using transparent data as a really good starting point. So let's see a tech company, for example. Well, maybe they could significantly reduce churn. I mean, that is where a customer moves away to a sort of very similar kind of competitor because there's just something missing in the offering and they go to that competitor, so they churn. That is a tech industry phrase here. So if they can reduce churn by a significant percentage, maybe 15%, then they will very likely be able to demonstrate increased trust metrics by probably 10, 20, maybe 30%. And so that will be an interesting one. And of course, the whole thing here of measuring and performance of data comes into play as well here. So it's not just about doing stuff, but it's about measuring the impact of the doing that you actually take on board. So this tech company, for example, what steps would it have taken to do that, reducing churn by addressing data transparency? Well, they're very likely to have created educational content on data usage. In other words, they'll have shared really openly and honestly the way that the customer's data is going to be used. So they'll have kind of informed and built a really good kind of knowledge from the customer's perspective about how that data is being used. Again, building trust at every step of that journey. They'll have updated as well their privacy policies along with customer input. So not just sat there in an ivory marketing tower and working with the legal team saying, well, this is what we think is important, so we're going to update our privacy policies in isolation from the customer and just tell the customer this is how we do it, but actually taken the customer on board and actually listened to the customer, got the customer involved in those meetings even. I mean, wouldn't that be interesting? But that is transparency, that is honesty, that is building trust and loyalty. And then publicizing it through third-party audits. In other words, actually getting another organization in, a third-party organization, maybe the tech industry regulator, for example, to come in and openly audit in a public sense how they've now improved what they do. I mean, can you imagine the information that you could put out through PR, through social media, through the customers' networks and connections? That would be so, so powerful. So another simple little example of how, again, from a process perspective, you can start to become a more responsible marketer. So it is about building those little pieces of the jigsaw. It is about taking that broad view of, where are the gaps in our responsible marketing kind of makeup here, the frameworks and stuff, but also as well looking at some of the tools and technologies that can just get you started at a granular level. Remember, we're not starting holistically right across the organization or with every piece of marketing. We're looking at little points, little pinpoint points of focus here, so we can go laser focused into one or two things and start to get those things right, talking to the customer to make sure that it's relevant to them too. So we could be looking at CRM tools, we could be looking at some transparency platforms, we could be looking at social listening tools. There are many ways we can start to become more actively listening marketers. So a responsible marketer is one who has mastered the art, or at least is on the journey to mastering the art of active listening. So CRM tools, which will give us this kind of feedback, could be, tools that will allow us to capture and manage customer feedback. So Salesforce, if you're in a big organization, maybe even a spreadsheet if you're in a micro business. Anything that enables you to capture and manage consistently the customer feedback that you're actively listening for. So however you define customer relationship management, CRM, it's about thinking about those tools and then using those tools to bring back inside your organization the opportunity to then adapt and evolve. Transparency platforms are those for sharing sustainability data. A good example is Provenance Transparency Platform here that enables you to build a story in collaboration and co-created with your customers that helps you to share the sustainability journey that you're on. Remember, I said about it being as as open and transparent and honest as you can make it. Well, these kinds of transparency platforms enable you to do it in a way that is probably very different to how you've been doing it, which is probably just through a CSR page or some kind of responsibility page or I don't know, an annual report, if you like, on your website. That's the real old school way of doing it. The more interactive way of doing it is to create areas where people can actually share and collaborate on this kind of stuff. And you will find, I will almost guarantee you will find when you then use your social listening tools, so something like, say, Brandwatch, or just maybe a manual process of going in and listening intently to your social channels, when you see your customer sentiment increase, in other words, moving from neutral to positive or from negative to neutral, that will be happening as a direct result and as direct evidence that you're becoming a more responsible marketer. So the more you do this stuff, the more you actively listen. How hard is that? The more you're open and honest. How hard is that? The more you're transparent and get into conversations with customers. How hard is that? You will see your consumer or your customer sentiment improving. And that's a measure of the loyalty score. That's a measure of how your trust is improving. So all of these things are at a very simple level, not particularly complicated. But what they require you to do is to just open your mind, open a new definition of marketing. And then as you go through this, start to think about, okay, what's actually important, both to us as a business that we track? What kind of metrics would we now be liking to measure and monitor and share across the business? Not just how many sales did we get, not just how much profit have we made, but things like our trust score. Surveys and net promoter score give you an incredible amount of nuanced data there that shows that we're not only doing good business, but we're doing the right business. That's an interesting new way of actually measuring your progress. Engagement rates, another great metric to track. Okay, it's all about, yes, getting some eyeballs on your content and your products and services so you can drive those sales, but it's all about doing the right kind of social and campaign interactions. So when you talk about engagement, it's the right kind of engagement where you're not just looking for the sale, you're actually looking for the relationship that comes from that sale too. This is responsible marketing. And when you talk about sales metrics, which of course, I know many of you are going to be in, commercial organizations where you are driven to making sales and supporting the sales initiatives and effort. And I know that, I get it. I'm in such an organization myself too. But it is all about looking at the impact on repeat purchases and the impact on customer acquisition. And that phrase that I use right at the outset, the customer lifetime value, that's a key one, CLV. We've had it for a long, long time, decades in marketing. You've seen it in the textbooks, it's been here, but it is right now how we're redefining lifetime value. It isn't just about the sales value, that numerical value. It's about the relationship value that we get through the customer's lifetime engagement with us. So these are some of the metrics that are both objective, but also subjective, a little bit softer, a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more fundamental and emotional, if you like. And when you start to talk about this stuff, there will be barriers. I'm not naive enough. I've been in this game long enough to know that you're going to get challenged. People are going to say, oh, we don't need any of that stuff, or oh, we'll put that stuff off. It's kind of for 2025, or it's 2028, or it's 2020, 2030, or even 2050 for our net zero targets and stuff. And they just put it off till tomorrow. So there will be a resistance to change. You are going to see that there's some kind of cost, if you like, to these transparency initiatives. There will be a fear of backlash for past mistakes where, well, we tried that before and it didn't really work. These are some of the common barriers, but If you can be focused on the solutions, if you can know that this is just fundamentally the right way of doing business as well as marketing in the future, then you can start to focus on the solutions. You can build internal buy-in with leadership support, get a sponsor for your responsible marketing initiatives. Start small with high impact initiatives where you know the customer's going to give you some good feedback. And of course, that feedback then you can use as an amplifier, if you like, across the business. Don't be reliant on just your personal crusade. Get the evidence. And acknowledge past issues openly and outline resolutions. In other words, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution for that problem. That's the mindset your line management, your CEO, your C-suite are going to be coming from. But if you come to them with evidence-based resolutions to our previous problems, if you're looking at this long-term customer relationship building, which is ultimately what you're doing here with responsible marketing, then what is not to like? Your audience is going to be receptive to this, both internally, but also externally, if you can position this right. But don't be naive enough to think you can solve this in a day or even a year. This is a long-term commitment. So it needs to be brought into your overall planning. But it is an essential building block of trust here in 2025 and for the coming years as well. Responsible marketing is the new way of trading. It really is. And you will see competitive advantage if you choose to take this on. So it's so exciting if you're willing to do this. So strategic alignment with ethical principles from the world around you, from your stakeholders, and for the best for the planet is absolutely key. Deciding on your tactical steps for enabling practical implementation. Don't dress this up in the complicated stuff. Make this super practical. So starting small is the way to do it. Lots of little pilot initiatives, little pilot test campaigns is the way to build the momentum that you need to get the buy-in to do more and more and more as you go forward. And the really key thing here, and this is something that I can't say loud enough or long enough or hard enough, is measuring success ensures continuous improvement. So make sure you're logging every step of the journey. Your key performance indicators are the ones that have got to really stand true and proud here. So you need to be measuring progress on the journey. And so it's all about the trends in a positive direction. And of course, it won't always be positive. You will get setbacks and knockbacks. Not everything is going to work. Not everything is going to be received positively. But on balance, this is the right way to do marketing. On balance, this is the right way to do business. So in the long term, this will get success both for you personally, but also for your brand. So this is the new way to do marketing here in 2025, building trust through responsible marketing. I wish you every success with it. Keep in touch. Let me know how things go for you on this journey. But remember, start small, start at a forensic granular level, and just let those little seeds develop as you go forward into the rest of the year.